Good morning. My name is David Plazas. I'm the Opinion Engagement Editor and Editorial Board Chair for the Tennessean. We're delighted to have Mr. Bill Freeman, candidate for Nashville Mayor, meeting with the Editorial Board today as part of our endorsement process. In the room with us are President and Publisher Laura Hollingsworth, Executive Editor Stephanie Murray, and News Director Maria DeVarine. We're very pleased to have you, Mr. Freeman. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So one of the things that we'd like to start to discuss with you is you are seen as the front runner in this race. Tell us a little bit about why you think you're going to continue in that position, what you're doing to invest, because one of the things, obviously, you've been in internal polls and other polls, you made it to 20%, maybe beyond 20%. What is your strategy for keeping on top?
Well, we're not paying a lot of attention to the polls. I'm delighted that we're being perceived as the front runner. But I'll tell you what we're doing. We're working harder than any other campaign. We've knocked on 160,000 doors. That's just that number's never been touched in Davidson County. I think the next closest door knocker in this race has knocked on about 35 or 40,000 doors. So it's a multiple of several times. But that's just an indicator of how hard we're working. We're doing the same thing with TV. We're doing the same thing with direct mail. I'm speaking 3-4 times a day, traveling from one end of the community to the other. So we're running like we're a vote behind. The old adage, run like you're one vote behind, but that's what we're doing. At the end of the day, knocking on that next door is just the most important thing I can do, and we're just continuing to push like we're behind. So it's great for everybody to say we're leading in the polls, but I think that's nothing more than a result of the hard work of everything we've done, the cumulative effect of all of this. A campaign's not just one thing. It's the combination of all of those things, and I think that's the surge that we're feeling, and we don't see that diminishing between now and early voting and between now and August the 6th. We frankly see it escalating, and we feel very good about where we are.
You've made several messages in your commercials, for example, regarding the minimum wage, regarding other things. Could you tell us a little bit about more in depth of how you do that as mayor? How do you affect the minimum wage? And also the affordable housing piece we'll get to afterward, because that's been a big part of this debate as well.
Yeah, the minimum wage, as you know, there's not much the mayor can do about the minimum wage, except be a strong advocate for on a statewide basis increasing minimum wage. We've got to have a change in legislation down on Capitol Hill to do that. And what I will be is a strong advocate for an increase in the minimum wage, and do whatever I have to do. And what I like to say, and you all have heard me say it, but lobby from the courthouse to the White House and everything in between, and just make my voice heard for this city to increase the minimum wage.
The reason I ask that is because a lot of business advocates have been very much opposed to having minimum wage floors, essentially, because of the potential of businesses going under, not being able to afford that.
Right.
Could you talk to us? You're a business person. How do you essentially justify the increase and essentially stay in business?
Yeah, I came from that position. Years ago, I didn't think that legislating increase in minimum wage was the answer, that it would put us at a competitive disadvantage with surrounding counties and cities, that we would lose industry as a result of doing it. And that's kind of a natural feeling for a business person, to think that you're going to do something that might give you a competitive disadvantage. As I've studied the issue and looked at other cities around the country that have raised their minimum wage on a citywide basis, and those cities have exploded and just prospered and done very well, just the contrary to what I was afraid of. So my thinking about an increase in minimum wage came from that business perspective, that I didn't think it was a good idea, and the more I've studied it, the more I like it. And I think it's something we need to do in Nashville. And what it'll do in Nashville, if we can get this done through the legislature, it'll lift tens of thousands of people out of poverty, give tens of thousands of people housing options they don't have now. And I think it'll just be great for our community. There'll be reduced cost for the city in terms of all the social services that we provide for those at the bottom of the pay scale. And I think this is a great solution and worth talking about and worth having this discussion and having the debate.
Have you implemented it already in your own business?
Yes, we have. We don't have any full-time employees at minimum wage. They're all above that. That's something, that position we've had for several years. Not anything we've done in this election season. It's just the right thing to do. And I know there are businesses, fast food and otherwise, that employ a lot of minimum wage people that are concerned about that issue, and they employ high school students during the summer, and they pay the minimum wage, and those kids are happy to have that job. And this is going to be a problem for some. I understand that. But the benefits that the community in general will receive, the additional income that those people will have, the additional spending that they will be able to participate in, I think will be good for the economy overall and be good for the city.
Affordable housing is something that you've talked quite a bit about, specifically those 10,000 units that, that you want to build. If you could take us through specifically, how does that work exactly, and how can people take advantage of that? Because when we talk about affordable housing, it can mean a whole lot of different things to different people.
What my plan is, and what I've talked about, is to develop 10,000 affordable housing units over the next 4 years. That's 2,500 units a year for 4 years. And to do that, not through the MDHA, not through HUD or the federal government, but to do that through the private sector. And the beauty of that, the magic of that, is that the private sector can get involved with the proper incentives that we as a city can provide them, property tax incentives, financing incentives, other things that we can do. They can get started with that plan 30 days from now. We don't have to wait for HUD or for the federal government to do something. We can engage the private sector with the proper incentives. In return for those incentives, what we're going to ask for is a rental rate that would be fixed for some period of time. We've talked about 5 years, talked about 10 years. All that is a work in process and in progress, a work in process at this time. But in return for that, they would have to keep those rents in the affordable range. What is affordable? It depends on what kind of a unit they build. Mm-hmm. Is it a 1-bedroom? Is it a 2-bedroom? Is it an apartment? Is it a home? What I'm envisioning are single-family homes. It would be 3-bedroom, 2-bath type homes that could be built on single-family lots. Now, we would have some multifamily, probably a component of that as well, but the real magic of this is that we're going to develop single-family homes on lots all over the county, not in one neighborhood, not in one area, but all over the county. And those could either then be purchased at an affordable price or rented at an affordable rate. What that rate would be on the rental rate, what I would consider to be an affordable rate, what we need to provide is something in the $500, $600, and $700 range a month. If we can provide a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home for a family with one working parent or maybe two in that rental rate that would be new housing, nice, well located, that's not available right now. Our average rent, the average apartment rent right now is in the $900, almost $950 a month range. So if we could get a single family home in that $500, $600, $700 a month range, it's going to be difficult. We're going to have to really work on finding the incentives. We're going to have to really entice private developers to do it. The lower the rent is, maybe the shorter period of time we would get them to participate in the program. Maybe it's 5 years rather than 10 for the right rental rate. All that has to be negotiated, but that's the concept. Affordable housing for families in Davidson County.
What would those incentives look like? What could be an example of one of those incentives at a private company? Because that's quite an investment to make for that sort of return on investment. So how would you incentivize that?
I visited with a minister a few weeks ago, and he showed me 2 homes that his church had built, brand new. We visited the homes that fit in this category. They were 1,250 square feet, 3-bedroom homes. They may have been bath and a half rather than 2-bath, but in that size category, small yards, urban locations, and they're doing it as a church. And they were able to sell those homes in the $110,000 to $120,000 range. Well, when interest rates are 4.5%, 5.5%, they're providing affordable housing, just doing it at a market rate. And I think with the incentives we could provide, things like tax increment financing, other incentives that the city could provide in terms of property tax incentives and other things, I think we can get that cost even lower and get those down under $1,000 and for the right size unit, even down into the range that I
So you
talked
think
about.
it could be done
Yep.
using a combination of TIFs and just
Right.
property taxes?
That's correct.
So one concern I see is just with the rising property values, potential rising property taxes that correspond to that, and also inflation in itself. How do you ensure that people can stay in their homes after that 5-year period?
Well, what I'm envisioning is a plan that would, every year we would do another group of units. So the units that roll out of the plan in 5 or 10 years, there would be new units coming into the plan. So that's how that would work. We just have to see how successful this program is, how cheap we can get the rents in the rental housing, how low we can get those rents. And then, as I said, it may be 10 years rather than 5. All of that has to be negotiated based on the benefits that we can give someone to put something in that program. And if they'll do it and stay in there for 5 or 10 years, stay in the program for 5 or 10 years, it would then roll out. They could charge a market rate and get the benefit of their investment. But new homes would be coming into the program. So it's not just a one-time thing. This is something we would continue to do. And we'll try to get that, the tail, as long as we can get it. If we can make it work on 10 years, we will do that. But it would be something in that range. And again, all this is a work in progress at this point. We will hammer out all those details later, but the bottom line is we've got to do something about affordable housing. There may be a better idea than this one. I'm wide open. I'm all ears, and we've looked all over the country at other cities, what they've done. I think I mentioned to you last time that Salt Lake did a very similar program to this, and we've kind of fashioned it in the big picture, fashioned it after the program that they've done. But there may be a better idea. We may tweak it between now and next year, but we're going to take a stab at providing affordable housing.
Are there 2 or 3 areas of the community where you could see starting this as the pilot in your first 60 to 90 days and then rolling it out elsewhere? What would those areas be? Nashville, there's so much going on that finding lots and sites is going to be difficult, and I realize that. So we will probably look in the outlying areas first and work our way in. But if we can provide this affordable housing, real affordable housing, nice new construction, modern amenities, all the things in an affordable range, I think people will drive a little distance from the outlying parts of the county. But we also need housing in the urban core, because many people that need affordable housing lack transportation. So we can't all be in the outlying area. So we're going to have a combination of that. It may be that we, as you suggested, that we start in the outlying areas just because of the availability of sites and work our way in.
Transit, you've just mentioned, how do we address that then? What is the Bill Freeman plan for addressing our road congestion?
Well, it's a bold plan, and it's a big plan, and it's an expensive plan. What I've said, and you've heard me talk about this, but we're 10 years late in getting started on a mass transit solution. The plan that I'm envisioning is probably an 8 or 10 year plan to complete. The funding for those the multi-billion-dollar mass transit plans that were available a few years ago in Washington are not available today. That pendulum will swing again. There will be funding available, and we will find that funding and start to work on it. I think we're a few years away from needing from the funding necessarily being available to us, but I think it's going to take us a year or 2 or 3 to understand what it is that we want, to design the system that we want. We will have the funding to do that in the city, and we don't have to solve the major financing problem to build the system for a few more years. So we'll have time to work on that, I'm convinced we'll get help from Washington, and we'll get started on the mass transit solution. I think it's doable. We're the 25th largest city in the country. Most of the cities larger than us on that list have a mass transit solution. They all funded it, one way or the other. We'll study how every city on that list above us funded their system, and we'll make the pitch to get help from Washington when we can.
Right now Congress hasn't been able to pass a long-term transportation bill in many, many years,
Right.
and actually their deadline is now July 31st after this 2-month extension.
Right.
And it seems that they're right now not a good partner at this very moment the way it
Right.
is, because it used to be you had those 6-year plans. How do you work around that if you can't get that dedicated funding? Because that's been the big complaint of the MPO, the
Yeah.
Metropolitan Planning Organization,
Right.
MTA, and so forth. What if you don't have Washington?
Well, if I had the solution about how to make Washington more workable, I would give it to you. I don't have that solution at hand. I think that's a temporary problem. I don't know if it's a year, 2 years, 3 years. That pendulum will swing. There will be funding available for mass transit. The need is too great. We're going to have it, and I think that will come back our way. I know that's not a specific date or specific answer about when and how we're going to get the funding. We have to have help from Washington. That's what other cities do. That's the only way you build a regional mass transit system. And we've got leaders in the U.S. Senate from Tennessee that can help make that happen. We've got leaders in Congress. Certainly Jim Cooper's office can be a huge help in that regard. It's not going to be easy. But I'm convinced we can get it done, and I'm convinced that funding will be available before we need it.
You mentioned regional a minute ago,
Yep.
which is really important when we talk about transportation, because obviously buses don't stop when we get to the edge of Nashville, and light rail wouldn't either. How would you work with the region, Bill, to build that sort of strategy? What sort of tactics would you take?
Well, there are 22 mayors within the mid-state area. And I think you have to work with every single city, every community, even those communities that wouldn't be directly on a line of the mass transit system. It will benefit everyone. And as a group, we're stronger than we are individually. And we've got the perfect vehicle to do that with the Mayor's Caucus of all the mid-state cities. And I think that's a great place to start. That's what I would envision doing, starting there. And part of that process is you're going to have to sell these mayors in some of these outlying areas that they need mass transit. That's not the number one thing on their list like it is ours in Nashville. So that whole process is going to be a big organizational effort and a sales effort on the part of the mayor, convincing these other mayors to get involved in this system, the benefits that they would have. The easy ones are Franklin, Murfreesboro, Lebanon, those commutes along the interstate system. The tougher ones are those that are not on the interstates, that won't have the direct benefits. But I think that everyone will understand that a regional system will relieve traffic everywhere and make it easier for everyone to get in and out of the city.
You said you have a big, bold plan, and I'm sure that's on your website. Did you want to, for the viewers, what are the elements of that plan?
Well,
Your vision?
the AMP had a price tag of about $167 million, as you know. I think what we're talking about is in the billions of dollars, whether that's $3 billion or $4 billion or $5 billion. I don't know that yet. We don't even know whether the system will be above ground, below ground, rail, exactly what it will be. Will it be on wheels like a bus system of some kind? I don't happen to think that's the solution, but I think some kind of a high-speed rail system is probably what we're talking about. It may even be an above ground system that goes overhead and misses all the traffic. None of those details are worked out yet. And what I've said I would do is on day one in the mayor's office is hire a transportation expert that knows about all those dozens of different options and city designs, and have that person in the mayor's office from day one that will be advising the city on what we ought to do, how we ought to study, beginning to assemble that group of regional mayors together, and having that discussion with the community, not doing that in a vacuum, but having an open discussion with the community. What would you envision? Where do you envision seeing stops? What kind of a service would you like? And I just think that's what we have to do. We've got to talk about this, have a conversation about it. Hopefully, you will be involved in that process, and the entire community can talk about what it is that we need, what it is that we want, what it is that we can afford, and how we go about finding the money.
Do you see partnering with Steve Bland and what's going on with their strategic planning process and the public input on that, and have you talked to him?
Yeah, I've had several meetings with Steve, and I have told everyone that I've talked to, I am very impressed with Steve and the job that he's doing. I think he's a great find for the city, and I think he's going to play an integral part in solving this mass transit problem. I hope that he will. He's sure going to have an opportunity, if I'm elected, to have a seat at the table and to help us guide that process forward. He's a perfect guy to chair that whole process, and I think that's the logical place to start. I've obviously not in a position to ask him to do that yet, haven't had that discussion. I've said publicly that I'm very impressed with him, as is everybody that I've met with. I think we really made a terrific hire with him, and I want him to have a seat at the table and be hands-on and involved in that process.
Speaking of having a transportation expert, you said you'd might hire a transportation expert
Right.
when you're in the mayor's office. That was something you do on day one. How else do you see structuring the mayor's office if you were to win that election?
You're talking about names, or are you talking about just the structure of the office generally?
Structure first.
Yeah. We've looked at the staffing in the mayor's office, kind of looked over the people that are in place now. I think there's some changes that we would make. Some of them are just very apparent to me that we would do, and some will take a little longer and get our feet on the ground and understand it. But one of those changes might be the fees we're paying for the city to have a lobbyist. We're right here a few blocks away from the state capitol. We'll have people on the mayor's staff that have great relationships with the legislature, that have great relationships with the governor. I don't know that we need to pay a private company several $100,000 to lobby for the city of Nashville when we're right here. But things like that we will we'll look at all of that, and I really probably shouldn't give specific examples because they may be doing a whole lot more than I am seeing that they're doing. And I may have a different take on that after I get in the office and understand. But I know there's some things probably that we're going to do internally that are now being contracted out.
As you talk about the need for a regional look at transportation, I know the last time you were with us, when we talked about growth and economic development and how Nashville has really taken off in the last few years, you had a little different approach about economic development and the need for Nashville to be in the driver's seat.
Right. That's a great question, and I'm guilty as charged on that. I think we've got to develop a more Nashville-centric focus as a city. You've heard me talk about the great job that our chamber is doing, and they're just doing a terrific job. But they have a regional approach, not a Nashville approach. So what I'm going to be is the mayor of Nashville, not the mayor of Middle Tennessee. And my focus is going to be on Davidson County, job growth, corporate relocations in Davidson County. Of the major corporate relocations that have announced over the past year or so, under 50% of those went into Davidson County. The majority of them went outside the county. Nothing wrong with that, and I'm delighted to have growth in the outlying counties, but my focus is going to be on job growth, growth in tax base in Davidson County only. That's what I'll concentrate on first. Now, if we can't get a corporate relocation here, they want to go to Wilson County, I'm delighted to help them do that, but we're going to first work as hard as we can to get them in Davidson County. And I think I'm unique in that take. Some have been critical of that point of view. but I think it's the right thing to do. We're paying in Davidson County for all the regional infrastructure and improvements, from sports teams to transportation to airports to you name it, and we ought to get our fair share of the corporate expansion that goes on in the region. And I don't think we are. We're close, but we can do a little better job there.
You had mentioned the AMP just a moment ago, and it's a segue to talk about projects like the AMP, the flood protection system, the jail move, and then the police headquarters that all failed because the community wasn't on board. What might you have done differently, and how would you approach trying to get support for a project that might be controversial?
Yeah. Let me start by saying that I'm a big fan of Carl Dean. He's been a great mayor. He's been a mayor of integrity. He's done a good job. We've had bad mayors in the past. Carl is not one of them. He's done a great job as mayor. I'm a big fan. If he has a weakness, is that it's usually he's the smartest guy in the room, and he tends to make a decision and tell us what we're going to do. He's usually right. He's a very, very bright guy. But I think that's a little bit of what happened on some of these decisions. The first thing that many folks heard about all these major decisions was when they picked up the newspaper and read about it. There was no discussion. There was nobody at the table. And I say no, there was some discussion, but very little. The general public had very little knowledge of what we were doing, why we were doing it, how much it was going to cost, what the options were. I wouldn't handle that way. I have perfect hindsight. Now, looking back at how that unfolded, it's easy for me to second guess those decisions. But my style is collaboration, getting everyone around the table, sharing the ideas, the potential solutions, getting everyone's input, making a decision, and moving on. I don't feel like that happened. But listen, I don't want to sound overly critical of Carl Dean. He's done a terrific job, been a great mayor. But I think that one weakness, I think he could have done a little better on that. I think the common link in all those projects you mentioned is that problem. And there was very little discussion. Not that they're bad ideas at all, but nobody knew anything about it. The flood wall, and I know that's something that you are interested in. Had I understood all the other options and what we had looked at, what we'd considered before we decided on the flood wall, I might have had a different feeling about it. But I don't know what other options we looked at. It seemed to me that problem started way upstream on the Cumberland River. Water was released from a dam in Kentucky that had some structural issues, and the water level got high, so they released water. That compounded as the water moved downstream. The Corps of Engineers, Jim Cooper, had hearings in Washington on the bad decisions that they made, that they released too much water too soon. That caused a great deal of flooding. So there's so many issues that we can improve on before we build a $100 million flood wall. And I think all those problems could have been prevented had they been handled properly by the Corps. And again, I've got perfect hindsight. I can look back and tell you what they should have done. But that's what these hearings demonstrated, and I think we could have done a lot better job. And for us, the other thing about the flood wall is that very few cities that do flood mitigation projects like that, especially at that level, they always have federal funding. They always have help from TVA, from the Corps of Engineers, from the federal government. We just decided without any debate that we were going to pay for 100% of it. And it was just kind of announced, this is what we're going to do. And I don't care who you are, $100 million is a lot of money. And to not have any more discussion, and as I've moved around the community, people have priorities in all kinds of neighborhoods. Plus, there are areas that flooded that wouldn't be impacted by the flood wall. Areas of the county, neighborhoods, Hermitage, East Nashville, areas that Bellevue, that homes flooded. And flood wall wouldn't do anything for those. So I think we mishandled that on several levels. I know it's an issue you're passionate about, but I'm as frustrated with the process as I am with the solution.
When you talk about the cost of the flood wall, I think that vote and a couple others seem to point to the fact that the community is a little bit concerned about the debt load or taking on additional bond debt. Can you give us your viewpoint of the city's finances?
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic than that about the city's finances. We do have, we've spent a lot of money, we do have a lot of obligations, but we've done that at a time that the city has seen just unbelievable growth. We've also done it at a time when bond rates, interest rates were at lifetime lows, just very, very low interest rate. So it's been an opportune time to do some of that. But I think, having said that we have spent a lot of money, almost $1 billion on the major projects that we could name. And I think it's probably time to take a step back, to look at what we've done, to absorb that debt load. Let's see how we're doing. We've overlooked some things in terms of pay raises for Metro employees, for fire and policemen, city workers, teachers, just all kinds of things that we're not doing because we're spending lots of money other places. So I think it's probably time, in my view, to step away from a major expenditure. Now, I'm saying that having just talked about a $3 or $4 billion mass transit problem solution, but I think that's something, as I said, that will be several years ahead, and we need to probably just step back, focus less on downtown, more on the neighborhoods, more on small spending rather than big spending, and just go through a budget cycle, see where we are, and then begin to start looking at some other things.
I know one of the unions, the contract is coming up or it's up and negotiations are starting. Knowing that you are advocating for raises for a cross-section of city employees, is that something you would want to be involved in? Is that something you would advocate delaying until a new mayor is elected?
Yeah, I think it's a little early to be talking about that. What I do feel like is that we have some key service employees that have not had raises up until the most recent raise that they just got, but went several years without keeping up with cost of living. Really, their paychecks were worth less every year. And these are the people that when you pick the phone up and dial 911 and need help, these are the people that answer at 3 o'clock in the morning and show up. And I just think we have to take care of those people that are taking care of us. The siren going by
There's one now.
yeah, right. But they do that 24 hours a day, and to think that we have kind of balanced the budget on their backs and not given them the adequate pay raises, it's just not the right thing to do, and I think we've got some catching up to do. That's how I would run my own business. And it's how I think we need to run the city. And we don't want to overpay anybody, but we certainly need to keep up with cost of living.
On that note, would you want to speak about anything regarding the pension problem we may have?
Yeah.
How you might approach that?
Yeah. I've spent, I wish I had kept up with how many hours I've spent in meetings and discussions. And I have great respect for those that have a different point of view and say that the end is near and we've got to make some changes. But what I've seen in the data that I've looked at tells me that those plans are in the top 5% in the country, that they're in great shape. Sure, we need to tweak them a little bit, may need to make some adjustments, but they're they're ranked some of the best in the country. And I just don't think that the problem is that imminent and that there's anything we have to do this week, this year, this term to change that. And it's my judgment and the judgment of the professionals that I've talked to that have looked at these systems, pension system, that they are sound, they're in great shape. Not only that, they're ranked some of the in the top 5% in the country. So
We've got some things we need to do. Some of the healthcare costs, those are issues we've got to look at and address. But I think we're in fine shape at the moment, and no need to make a dramatic turn to the right or left on those issues.
Talking about some, oh, please.
Just to going back to real estate somewhat, just for a minute. Obviously, your career has been built on being successful in real estate and running Freeman Web. How would you, in office, Bill, separate yourself from your company so that you could really focus on being nonpartisan? And would there be any disclosures that we would hear about that might surprise us?
You know, I've disclosed tax returns, I've disclosed financial information, only can to do that. We would continue to do disclosures. I would not have any interest in Freeman Web and what the company does. We would put those assets in a trust, or we haven't figured all that out yet, but there are certainly ways. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a necessity. Now, we've got a lot of assets scattered all over the county, and everything the city does, one way or the other, I'll have some kind of it'll impact something that I might have an interest in. But, you know, I'm not doing this job or trying to get this job so that I can somehow have our properties treated better than they are. We're delighted with the communities we're in, with how the economy is going, how our city is doing. I'm happy to put those assets in a trust of some kind so that there's no conflict at all. And all I can tell you is, and I think you know this, that we'll disclose everything, every interest I have in anything, which I've already done. You'll be able to look at that. You'll know what I'm doing. If we're improving a road and I happen to own a property near that, you know, it'll be talked about, discussed, and frankly, it'd probably be harder to get that road improved than one where I don't own a property. So I don't know how else to deal with that, but I have no concern about it, and hopefully I can demonstrate to you that I'm going to handle that in a way that it's not a conflict.
I think Senator Corker, when he was mayor of Chattanooga, probably faced, if you're elected, what you'll be facing because of all of his real estate holdings.
Exactly.
Have you reached out to him or looked at how he structured stuff going into his?
I haven't. I'm a friend and supporter of his, and he happens to be my idea of a great mayor. I think he was an unbelievable mayor in Chattanooga. Did a terrific job, and he handled that well. I know our governor has got a lot of assets. He's chosen not to put those in a blind trust, but I don't feel like there's been tremendous conflicts with Governor Haslam. You know, so there are ways to solve these problems if you have assets that are affected by your term in office.
Talking about imminence, we have the school board meeting with candidates for superintendent at this very moment, actually.
Yep.
You were supportive of delaying the process of hiring a superintendent. Tell us a little bit more about that, and what would you like to see the superintendent or the school board do, pardon me, at this time?
Let me say that I think the school board has done a great job. I mean, we've got the most engaged, interested school board that I've seen in a long time. They're smart people. They're engaged at every level. And thank goodness we're not paying them by the hour, because they're spending just inordinate amounts of time to serve our community in that way. Where I think we dropped the ball was in the consultant that we hired, the consulting firm that we hired. I've been very disappointed in the way they've handled this process. I was surprised to learn that the fee we paid that consulting company was something in the $40,000 range. And the thing that struck me, that seemed pretty cheap. If they're going to have a national search for hundreds of candidates looking for the best person in the country to run our school system, we maybe traded a little too hard on the fee, and we got what we paid for. But I'm not at all satisfied with that process. We've got some good candidates in there, but we've got some that aren't so good. And I just think probably need to hit the pause button, take a deep breath, start that process completely over,
my suggestion would be with a new search firm and really do an exhaustive search over the entire country. You know, maybe have a few more than 4 candidates for us to look at when it's all over. And I think we can, and no disrespect to any of the candidates, I think we've got a couple of great candidates that I've heard listen to their presentations. But I just don't think the process by the search firm was as wide-ranging and as exhaustive as it could have been. Maybe I will find out that I'm incorrect on that, but that's my take based on the conversations, what I've read, what I've seen. I think we could have done a better job.
In your letter about hitting the pause button on this process, you mentioned that you'd like us to be able to step back so that the new mayor, the new members
Right.
of council can participate. I think it was
Right.
an open dialogue.
Right.
How do you see that open dialogue exactly happening? What does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, I think if I were a candidate looking at that job, I wouldn't want to be selected now and then a month later have a council that 50% of the council members, more than 50% are brand new, a new mayor, a new vice mayor. I would want to do that after the election if I were a candidate looking for the school board position. And I think you've heard some of the candidates say that it's just a difficult process to come in and do it the way that we've set it up. Again, I want to be careful that I'm not being critical of the school board because they are the hardest working people in Metro government. They do a terrific job. I just think this consultant that we used, the process wasn't what it should have been. And I've got some other issues with the company as well, but I'll just leave it at that for now. I think we need to probably scrap that process, start over, take a little time. A few extra months isn't going to hurt us if we get a great director that the city gets behind. If you look at the list, the letter that the list of community leaders wrote from the chamber, if you've got the chamber and the NAACP agreeing on something and everybody in between, it amazed me the different entities that were in opposition to this process, and that suggested the same thing a few days after I did, that we need to do the same thing that I'm suggesting.
You've written several op-eds over the last several months advocating for certain positions, most recently about Insure Tennessee. You've also talked about the bipartisan approach when President Obama came to Pellissippi Community College. If you are elected mayor, how would you use your bully pulpit to make sure that you don't overextend yourself, but at the same time so that you state messages that will have some sort of effect?
With respect to our relationship with the president, or are you talking about just on any issue?
On any issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the way that I've described this to people, I think all bets are on the table. I think you give 100% of your energy, your contacts, your resources to make these decisions for the city. I'm 63 years old. I'm towards the end of my career. If I serve 4 years in the mayor's office, if I'm lucky enough to be reelected and serve 8 years, this is the last thing that I'm going to do, the last contribution that I'm going to make to the city. And I think you use every conceivable resource that you have to move the needle and improve things in your hometown, and that's what I'm doing. Hopefully that answered that.
Do you ever see that could put you in conflict with lawmakers, for example? And I'm just curious in terms of what your thought process is. How do you fight and at the same time negotiate at the same time?
You know, I think that everybody is interested in the same thing. I mean, the issues that we're talking about on the Hill, for example, there's no dispute over the issues. There may be dispute over whether funding's available, how much funding is available, how fiscally conservative an administration is versus the needs of the city. All of those things are issues that we can discuss, but nobody really doubts the need for affordable housing, doubts the need for the mass transit need, those types of issues. I think there's much more agreement on those issues than there is debate.
Can we go back to education just for one moment? You've been criticized for being a cheerleader for
Yeah.
our Nashville public schools.
Yeah.
That you think they're doing a great job, in great shape. Others are saying that's not so.
Yeah.
Do you want to provide some commentary on
Yeah, I had attended a forum, and another candidate gave our education system the grade of an F. I don't think that's constructive. I think our teachers in Metro Nashville, our Metro public school teachers, are so thrilled to have anyone say something positive about the job that they're doing. And what I've said is that our teachers are all heroes. They're doing a fantastic job. They have an incredibly difficult job in front of them. You've heard me talk about the languages that are spoken in Metro Public Schools, 151 different languages, versus just a fraction of that in our surrounding counties. We've got 65% of our Metro school students that are on the free and reduced lunch program. I mean, it's a difficult job, and they're doing a fantastic job teaching our students, doing the best they can with the resources that they have. So I don't back up from bragging on our teachers. Two of my sisters are teachers, and I know firsthand the hours they work. And as I've met with teachers, what I tell them, you don't do this for the paycheck. You're not a teacher to take home that huge six-figure paycheck that you get being a teacher. You're doing it because you love kids, you want to help, you're passionate about it. And then to do that and be constantly criticized about what a failing school system you have, what a poor job you're doing, I don't think that's the way. If I'm going in to talk to an employee that I have, and I want to get the best performance out of them, I don't look them in the eye and say, you're failing, you're terrible, this is the worst situation ever. Who does that in life, in business, in relationship? And I just don't think it's productive to do that with anyone. And we're failing to mention all the wonderful achievements that our teachers and our Metro school system. And let me add one other point to that. And I've made this to you before, I think, but there's a reason the President of the United States came to Nashville and spoke at a public school. The First Lady came to Nashville and spoke at a public school. We're doing a lot of things right. We just don't talk about that. But pardon me for interrupting you.
So acknowledging that people are working hard, the teachers are working hard, I just want to clarify, because when you said you're a cheerleader for the schools and things are good, are you saying that you think that the outcomes and the things that are happening in the Metro Public School System are fine? Are you happy with that? Are you visioning what's your vision?
Yeah, but that's a good point, and yes, we need to improve. Yes, we need to do better. But we need to recognize the unique set of problems that we're dealing with. We've got schools in Davidson County where 80% of the student body speaks English as a second language, or schools that have 50% that don't speak any English. I mean, it is remarkable.
But that's true in many urban areas across the country.
Well, it's not true in our bedroom communities. That's who we're compared to, and that's who we're losing. Families that move out of Davidson County into an adjoining county. They aren't moving to another urban area. They're moving to Wilson County or Williamson County or Rutherford County. And so what I've tried to do is point out the things we're doing right, improve the things that we're not doing right, and I don't miss the point that there are things we need to improve. I don't miss that at all. I just don't think it's productive to just to throw the whole system out the window and paint every teacher in every school. We visited over 30 schools, and the schools that I see, the students that I meet, the teachers that I meet, it's been one of the most remarkable things of this campaign. I have thoroughly enjoyed that process, and they're tired of being called failing teachers, failing administrators, failing students. So it's a very complicated issue. One of the things that I've talked about doing one of the concrete things that we can do is spend some more resources on education. We right now spend about 42% of our budget on education, and we've talked about maybe raising that a percentage point or two. For every point we raise it, if we spent 43% rather than 42, we would add about $19 million, a little over that, to education. Some of our bedroom communities are spending in the 60% range, so we're spending 42. So there are things that we can do to improve our system and improve our education. I'm not missing the point that there's some problems and things we need to do. I get that, but I don't give it an F either. I don't think that it's a total failure.
We have 3 charter amendments on the ballot. One to increase term limits for council members from 2 to 3, one to do that and also reduce the size of the council, and the third to require that the city have 40% of its workforce in building contracts be from Davidson County. Mm-hmm. How would you vote on that and why?
Yeah, I think some of those are problematic. I'm perfectly happy with the size of the council the way it is. I know it's huge. I know it's the 3rd largest in the country. But the benefit of that is that everyone in Nashville knows who their council person is, can usually get them on the phone. They're connected to the community, to the council in that way. So, and here's what I've told people: I can live with a 33-member council. I can live with a 30-member council. If you want to get it smaller than that, I can live with whatever the people of Nashville want. My personal vote would be, no need to fix what isn't broken, and I would leave it at 40. The other thing you would lose if you reduce the size of the council is the minority voice that we have in the council now. That if we reduce the size, we may lose. We're at risk at losing some of that. So I'm not for reducing the size of the council. On the 40% local workforce issue, I just don't think that's the way to solve that problem. You can't legislate that. I've thought through how you would keep up with the paperwork for if you're building a building over here and have 20 laborers, figuring out where each one is from, okay, keeping up with how many hours the Wilson County workers worked, how many hours Davidson County, and having all that, it'd be a nightmare for business. And I don't think that's the way to solve that problem. So I'm opposed to that for that reason.
And extending the terms?
Extending the term limits, I'm happy to do whatever the voters of Nashville want to do on term limits. I would probably vote against that. I think the system's working pretty well like it is. I'm old enough to remember the days when we had Sanders Anglia and members in the council that had served for long periods of time, had great institutional knowledge. There is a benefit to that. But I like the turnover that we're having. We've got fresh faces in. It gives people an opportunity to get involved in local government that they might not have otherwise. So personally, I would vote against those. I could live with any of the outcome of any of those options, but I would leave everything like it is.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left of our interview. Any other questions?
A couple of different questions. Just curious, in your work with your company, very successful business, grown from zero to hero, and that when we look at your leadership style and what your employees, what your coworkers, what your peers, what your clients would say, can you give us a few adjectives, some words about you that would help us understand a little bit more about you that you think your employees would say about describing Bill Freeman?
Well, I think compassionate would be one that would be near the top of the list. How an employee is doing, not just in business, but in everything that they're doing is important to me. And I have some of my best friends are people that I work with, and not just at the highest jobs in the company, but in the all salary ranges. So I think I'm compassionate. I'm connected to the staff. And I think that what people would say about us is that we're innovative. We're willing to try something new. If something isn't working, we're not timid about making a change in what we're doing and trying to do better. We're always striving to do better. That's how we have achieved the
the national recognition we have is a small company, and always willing to try something new, fresh, and always listening to the people that work with you. That they know more than anyone. So, and I think many of those talents I'll take with me into the mayor's office, and I will find out from the ground level, how can we do this better? What can we do to provide better service? How can we be more efficient? Who knows better than the people that are out in the field and providing that service? So that's just that's the way we run our company. It's the way that I would serve as mayor.
Very good. And some of the candidates we've been talking about, sort of the brands that are appearing for our viewers and readers and TV commercials, et cetera. And what would you say your brand is? One candidate called it inevitable. I'd like to hear what you think about what Bill Freeman's brand is.
Look, I'll just stick with inevitable. I kind of like that, but you know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but at the end of this campaign, I'll have no regrets. Whatever happens, I'm delighted. We've got a great field of candidates running. I think I happen to have the most unique skill set, and it's a great time for someone like me to do this. But we don't have a bad choice in this field. And I'm just delighted with the process. I think it's been a very constructive process. I've done 45 forums, I think, 3 televised forums. And it's been a really, I would say exhaustive, but I don't mean that to mean that I'm tired of it. It's just, it is a grueling process, but it's a thorough process. And I'm delighted with the field. I'm delighted with my chances. I wouldn't say inevitable, but I'm delighted to see we're leading in all the polls that have been released. But we've still got a month to go, and we're working like we're a vote behind, as I said earlier. And I'll tell you this: at the end of this campaign, I hope what people tell you, nobody outworked Freeman. He worked harder than anybody else. He got up earlier. He worked later. We get in every night at 8:30. We start early in the morning. Nobody's going to outwork us. I think the door knocks are a great example of that. We're just working harder than the field. And I think at the end of the day, that matters to people. And so it's not this inevitability, it's that he really is working harder than anybody else. That's what we're seeing.
Well, we just have a few minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to say to our viewers before we end?
Well, one thing I'd like to say to each of you, and to tell you that my good friend John Sigenthaler, before he passed away, encouraged me to make the decision to run, and I wish that he were here to continue to give me some guidance on what to do and how to ask you for your help. But I think that one of the critical endorsements in this race is the Tennessean endorsement. I've received all the major endorsements, and I'm thrilled to have them, and they're all important. But at the end of the day, the Tennessean endorsement is a critical endorsement. I just hope that I have shown enough in my career and in my meeting with you last time, this time, nothing would mean more to me than to find out tomorrow or next week, whenever it is you will make the decision, that I've gotten the endorsement. And nothing is more important, and it's something that means a great deal to me. So I'm a salesman. I didn't want to leave without asking for the order, so consider that my ask. But I'm sincere in wanting it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freeman. Thank you to our viewers on Tennessean.com. There will be a replay of this particular video later this afternoon. Please watch all those videos and vote starting on July 17th, which is next Friday. And the election day is August 6th. Thank you.
Thank you.